Gosh, you know, 1 minute the cool kid on the block, and next it's trouble for Twitter. Right now, down 6%.
Getting beat up in the schoolyard.
That was your school. We just negotiated screenwriting contracts at
Beverly Hills High. That's right. It's 90210.
That's why we're yin and yang, Charlie. Shares taking a steep dive earlier today. Investors still digesting earnings from earlier in the week. How long does that take? They're still digesting earnings that were light on the guidance, showed slowing user growth. That's the problem, the user growth, sending shares lower. So we thought, let's bring in somebody who owns a big chunk of it. What's he doing with it? Billionaire investor Jeff Greene gives us his take, along with Fox Business senior correspondent Charlie Gasparino. Hey, Jeff.
Hi, Liz. Hi, Charlie.
Okay,
hey, Jeff.
What are you doing with your Twitter stock? The last we heard, you were straddling the $35 a share line.
Yeah, no, well, Liz, I have a very small position left. I mean, I shorted and sold, 90% of my Twitter a long time ago, thank God. But, at these levels, look, I did a straddle. I think my effective cost price after the straddle was 31 or so. Mm-hmm. And so I'm obviously down on that. And I'm hanging in there. I think that the stock, right when it's at these levels where the market cap's just under $20 billion, it's sort of a floor because there's enough optionality with this name, for either a takeout or just that Dorsey's going to make things happen, that I think we've kind of got a floor for the stock in the 27, 28 range. So I'm hanging in there with what I've got.
Hey, Jeff, it's Charlie. Here's the interesting thing. When I talk to bankers about this, there's no doubt they tell me that Twitter now would like to sell if they can find a buyer. And that's the big if. Apparently, the buyer would have to pay way too much money at this point. You have to pay a premium above what the stock is right now. So there's not going to be a buyer at these levels.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if they have to pay a premium. Look, years ago, Google was apparently had offered something like $9 billion. Right. That was when their user base was much smaller. They hadn't really proven they could even make any money. So I think, look, if I, as a stockholder, if something like a Facebook came along and said we're going to give you Facebook shares at even a little more than it is now at a $20 billion valuation, yeah, I would rather own Facebook, which owns Twitter, than own Twitter.
Nobody does what Twitter does. They just don't. We all are using it as a promotional material. I've talked to people who say Twitter can survive if it just figures certain things out. But what are you waiting for to see? Simply whether Jack Dorsey can make it fly?
I think there's a lot of optionality in there because, like what you say, it's a very, very unique platform. We're heading again into a presidential election year when it's going to get used more than any other presidential election year. And I think people are just hanging in there. It's an optionality kind of tech stock. Look, when I own my own Apple and Google, those are great cash flow machines. They don't have tons of cash there. Plus, they have an optionality.
But, and this doesn't.
So, Jeff, you're the average retail investor. You're mom and pop. You own some Twitter shares. Unfortunately, you bought it after it popped, so you got it at a very high price after the IPO, as the average guy does, always getting screwed. And you still you're holding on to the stock. What is the next material event for the average guy? Will there be one, like a sale, or do you think just they muddle along, Dorsey throws a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks?
I think the floor is established by the possibility of a takeout. I think because of that, it's not going to get taken out below 15, 17 billion, 18 billion. It's trading right around there now.
20 billion.
And the upside is, but it's not going to. This is where it should trade, I would think. And a strategic buyer could pay that because they have to get 300 million, users. I mean it's hard to start a company and get 300 million users.
You sound like you think they're going to be sold. You sound like this thing is done. They're going to change hands at some point. Am I misreading you?
Well, it looks that way. I mean, they picked Dorsey, who's already running another company. He's doing everything he can to keep the employees. He gives away a third of his stock to incentivize them to stay there. It just sounds like they're making they want to keep the company solid.
Those are Hail Mary kinds of things, or at least let's plug some holes in a leaking boat, Jeff. I look at Twitter and I think to myself, well, we use it and it's pretty cool, but is it going to be... This is a little bit of a stretch, but theglobe.com doesn't exist anymore. eToys not really around anymore. Or will somebody figure this out?
He says it's going to be sold.
That's the scary thing, because look at the users. I mean, user growth has slowed significantly, about 15 to 11%.
Yeah,
that's the wrong direction.
Listen, what do I know? I'm just a stupid reporter, but I think you're not, and you seem to suggest, and if you're the average guy out there, this thing will be sold. and it'll probably be sold not at a much more of a premium at what it's trading now, unfortunately.
No. Okay. No, and I think stockholders will be happy to look. It depends what they get. If it's cash, if it's a 10% premium, I think people would be happy to move on. I bet I think everyone will vote for it. If it's sold to a strategic buyer, which is another great tech company that you like to share, which you'd like to own the shares,
Facebook.
And I think it could sell for where it is today.
Yep.
I want that tagline: billionaire investor, Palm Beach, California. That's what we have under your name, Jeff.
California. Is there a Palm Beach,
I'm
California?
sorry, Florida. I'm thinking California.
Yeah, 90210. I'm just going to call it 90210 for now on.
Yeah.
Okay,
my
well,
sister
334,
developed that show back in the
You're
day.
always bragging about Beverly Hills.
What can I say? It's my hometown.
Thanks, Jeff. Good interview.
You can brag about the Bronx.
No, I grew up in Yorktown Heights, New York. This is something to brag about.
Jeff Greene, Charlie Gasparino. Jeff's actually, in truth, from Worcester, Massachusetts. Right, Jeffy?
That's right. I'm from Worcester. 01602. No television series about Worcester for some reason.
41602. Let's remember that.